Welcome to the Generation AI podcast, where we demystify artificial intelligence in the power of higher education. I am your host, JC Bonilla, joined by the insightful, my co-host, Ardis Kadiu. Session 3, Ardis. How are we doing today?
Oh, this is a good one. The AI workforce. I'm really excited about this one for sure. There's a lot of stuff happening in the market right now. And in AI, this week has been completely busy and overshadowed by a lot of this work. So really excited.
We're committed to be giving you a 3-part episode on the evolution, the introduction, the intent of many of us in this space to deploy agentic workforces, digital workforces, and not workhorses, workforces. And this is episode 3 that concludes this interesting series. So I hope you've liked it. Please go back to episode 1, 2, to make sure that when you go here, it all fits in, because it's cumulative, right? So Ardis, probably the best thing we can do is let's do a recap of episode 1, 2, and kind of how that knowledge is important for us to unpack the idea that there is something emerging that is the AI workforce, and interesting constructs of the workforce, such as the employee, the teammate, the office, and multiple of those constructs have their own parallel into this AI space. So remind us what episode 1 was all about. You want to do that recap, and I'll do number 2?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So episode 1 was all about the rise of the agentic system and essentially AI that is now becoming, more and more embedded in our day-to-day work. So these agentic systems have capabilities that are able to reason through tasks, are able to reason through problems, break down work around tasks, and have tools and capabilities in order to accomplish those tasks. So we talked about the framework of those agentic systems. On the second episode, we went a little bit deeper and we discussed how does an agent kind of become this multi-agent system. So when you start thinking about agents that are doing one task or another, they're very simple agents, but then you start putting those agents together that are completing different tasks. One of the very recently, I just heard a framework which is it called the Taco framework, which
Taco.
is
Okay, speaking my language.
so this idea of taskers. So like you have taskers. So basically, you have agents that are just doing tasks. They're completing tasks. You have assistants these assistants are a little bit more complex, and you're working with them, and you're kind of passing things on, and they're doing something a little bit more complex. Kind of collaborators is that teammate approach on these agents. So like, how do you use it as a teammate? So essentially is able to do these very complex things. And then orchestrators, the O is the orchestrators. So you have different types of agents, and the orchestrators and the assistants, collaborators, and the orchestrators are systems of multi-agent architectures. And that's what we talked about during our last episode. But that's, as a mental frame of mind, that Taco really stood out to me. And this is a framework from KPMG that one of the principles there is kind of pushing forward. Does that make sense to you, JC? The Taco?
100%. Yeah, of course it makes a lot of sense. And I'm a human that loves parallel narratives and analogies. That's a delicious analogy, not point intended. I like to remind everybody, as we think about cumulative knowledge, we departed from episode 1 and 2 with these components that are going to be used in this conversation. So we'll speak about agents as reason, technology that allows them to reason, allow them to adapt and generate action, right? We'll be talking about horizontal agentic systems as technologies that come to us that instrument agents, and they're basically looking at an enterprise level so they can operate in any industries. We also spoke about vertical, where Ardis and me and the Element ecosystem belongs to, that we bring this mindset, but it's deep in knowledge. So we speak enrollment management, or we speak, I don't know, CrossFit, gyms, whatever your vertical is, and the deployment of the agent or the agentic infrastructure already brings this domain knowledge, and it gives you more of an off-the-shelf experience, if you will. And
Correct.
the orchestration, I think, is going to be a really important word that we use, that when all these things get orchestrated, right, and kind of put together, you start unpacking this multi-agent system collaboration, and this is basically when it's happening at scale. So if this is cumulatively, it is happening this year, that's, I guess, why we're doing this podcast, inevitably, it emerges to a new construct of the workplace. And this is what episode 3 is all about. We know that the AI workforce, it's a place where, let's give a TACO acronyms come in, because tasks, what is the A for?
Assistant. So tasker, assistant,
Collaboration,
collaborator.
collaborator and orchestration is how we start working. Today, we have this idea of, okay, I understand collaboration, right? Meetings, the water cooler, right? Orchestration, retreats. I do manuals, I do planning, and how do I task and so on and so forth. But now, through the process of an digital worker, aka the agent, it changes a bit. The other thing I want to remind everybody as we start talking about the AI workforce is that there's something really, really important on the role of the human as the worker, as we have this mystique of the magical touch, the human connection, and all these systems allows us to basically start working differently, that possibly starts to enable us to go deeper there. Why? Everybody, look at your work week today. How much time did you spend not being human, in the sense of being special, the connections, but just doing emails and like transactional stuff? So one of the things that is going to emerge in this conversation today is that there is a change in how we do work, and from an assistant to an AI workforce changes the way of working. And I'll leave you with the last analogy, everybody, so I can go in with Ardis in this conversation. In my head,
Yep.
one of the last times where we saw this is when, IT cloud systems came about, but we have been going through these cycles over and over. It's starting with the Industrial Revolution. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden I don't need a cow and a horse to bring all the raw materials. I can have a conveyor belt, and all of a sudden, like, widgets can be produced at a high speed, right? And that shift in production has been seen over and over and over through cycles. So this is a new cycle that we're unpacking, that it's really, really interesting, and is spinning on this idea of AI and agents. So, Ardis, let's start the conversation with all this beautiful long setup of the unit of work, right? Can we start with a human? What is an AI worker in your head, right? So, right, I have a worker. I think everyone understands that, but now these technologies emerge. They have all these super incredible powers, adaptation, action, reasoning. So what happens to the AI worker that looks to the left, looks to the right, and what I have is maybe assistants and AI agents. So, but I am the human. So talk to me about the AI worker in your head.
Yeah, I think perhaps the AI, the person or the AI worker is a little bit more the most complex things that we can kind of describe as part of this conversation. We talked about AI agents, that we laid the groundwork with individual agents and how they're evolving into multi-agent systems, that they're collaborating together to do more complex tasks. And then we introduced the idea of the assistants, right? So they're helping actual human workers, and then specialized agents described for specific tasks. But kind of this next leap, right, that we're talking about today is when AI isn't just an assistant, but it becomes the core part of the organizational structure. So that's the core part that we're talking about here. And what does it mean when you have this AI workforce, right? It's just more than deploying the AI tool. It's about integrating AI as what we call digital workers or digital teammates into the organization. So think about this AI worker the same way that we talked about last time around writing a job description, and AI is able to, given a goal, break that goal into multiple tasks and then reason about it and then accomplish that goal over a period of time, by iterating and by using resources and by using tools or by collaborating with other AI agents as well. So that's the digital worker. They have a they have specializations, they have the ability to do complex tasks or to do complex work, and they're embedded into the organization. They have access to all of the data, they have access to all of the tools of the organization and all of the context, and then they're given goals around it. So when you think about it, the mirror from an employee and an AI worker, it's very, very similar in how we think about that. As an employee, as a human teammate, you have you're giving a job description and you have certain specialties that you're coming in, and you're given goals in order to accomplish those goals as part of the organizational task. And you're working every day and you're breaking that stuff down, but you have access to the different systems of the organization, you have access to the information. So what we're doing now with AI workers is how we're kind of mirroring that, but we're approaching it from a bottom-up approach. It's like from the task all the way up to the complexities of more strategic or more kind of complex goals. We go back to the idea that we talked. It's like as AI has evolved over the past couple of years, it's able to do more complex work and reason through and become smarter to kind of hold more context. So that's kind of the approach here is bottoms up, like automating, taking care of tasks, getting more complex, doing multiple tasks, building workflows around those tasks and kind of processes, and then ultimately making sense of, hey, is this process even good, right?
Right.
Or do I need to change it in order to accomplish this goal?
Ardis, so I think there's three things you just mentioned there. Let me take on the first one that I think is very interesting. An AI worker, right, should be seen as an employee. That's what you said, right? And emerges maybe bottoms up as a job description, but now it is in the enterprise. You said this, AI worker should be onboarded, should be trained, should have goals, should be managed, or I guess promoted or fired, just as an employee. Do you really mean that? Are we talking about that we're gonna start thinking about these AI agents with the mobility of a regular employee or a worker the same way? Say more about that. That's very interesting, and in my head, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, we're kind of seeing already that shift where these AI agents are not just tools, right? They're really being treated as employees. They really require, context. And in order to do more complex work, they need onboarding and they need configuration and they need, this special prompting that you need to give them, and you need to give them goals and guardrails and so on and so forth, training as well. You got to feed it with your data and then of course building those goals. So, and then the ongoing maintenance as well. Like the ongoing maintenance is really important here because these aren't the traditional, like the traditional technology automation. This isn't like process automation. With process automation, you have a workflow and then you break that workflow into certain tasks. And then you kind of codify those tasks and you say, okay, you're going to do this task, this task, this task, and we're going to automate that workflow. And you're going to get the same result every single time that you do that. With AI teammates, because of the reasoning engine components and the capabilities, it can reason very differently and it can give you very different results. So you're not going to get the same thing every single time you run something across a large language model or a reasoning model, right? It's going to give you slightly different things. So where this is really important is if you're putting that engine, that reasoning engine, as part of this digital, task manager or orchestrator or AI agent, you need to be able to, verify that they're doing the work and they're not drifting, right? This idea of validations or evaluations is really important. And that's the part where these systems are very different than a traditional IT automation or robotic, or we call them RPAs, right? Robotic process automation systems. These are very different because of that reasoning aspect. They're also very powerful because you can throw something new at them, and if they haven't seen that before, they'll still reason through it and they solve that problem. That's the beautiful thing about it. But you have to make sure that you have the guardrails to kind of keep checking them, because if the underlying model changes, right, then it can like make different evaluations on different scenarios. So you got to check, you got to make sure that you keep training them and you're evaluating them. Just like humans, it's like you got to evaluate them every 6 months and say, hey, are you doing the right job? Are you still on track with the goals that we're giving you and all that?
So, and I think that's a really important point that I want to slow down. We're talking about the emergence of an AI powered system agent that we humans will see as coworkers. And that's a really interesting shift in our workplace and how it looks like. So, teammates, coworkers that will have goals, they'll be trained, and they're managed, meaning they keep on moving up or they're actually pushed out.
So I have an example. I have an example of how you think about this. So until now, like last episode, we talked about AI agents around the marketing campaign, right? So the reasoning on, you talk to it, you give it a goal, and it's building an outline, and you're communicating. So essentially, it's that type of agent is non. It's working with you. It's like a coworker, right? So it's building, or it's maybe an assistant, like, so it's essentially helping humans be more productive. It's not working autonomously, right? You can't just let it run and do its thing. So you have to, it's essentially helping you get productivity. However, as we're building more autonomous agents in there, this assistance to do proactive, we call them proactive assistants, they're going to be given a goal. And based on that goal, they have all the tools that they need in order to reason, what do I do next? What kind of communication do I send to this student? And then they go through that process and building that communication and kind of interacting with the system and having access to all the data. So that is the AI, coworker that we're talking about. It doesn't, it's working in the background. It's working every single day. It's working every single minute. It's autonomous. It's working on the system. Yes, there is a manager or a human in the loop, but it doesn't need that human in the loop. The organization can decide when to look at stuff, at which point do they evaluate things, but it's not a prompt. So you don't have to prompt it every single time, right? You don't have to ping it and say, do this, do this, do this right now. It's actually, you give it a goal and it goes along, and then you can see the work progress that it's making along that. One more example, just to so that ties it into last episode, but another really good example is, and everybody will kind of understand this because we're talking about admissions, is a AI admissions, a counselor or evaluator or reader. We can call it however many names that we want, right? So, traditionally or not traditionally, but there is, kind of this helper tools in the market today around evaluations on application or documents, or making things a little easier to kind of summarize, some essays, or evaluate an essay and say, hey, summarize this for me. However, we are not to the place where we can have a full application read, and based on documents, based on the evaluation criteria, on the rubric, based on the grades. So essentially, we have not been able to do that. We can't just point an AI and say, evaluate this whole application and student based on our school's criteria and rubric, and provide a recommendation of admit, deny, conditional, admit, and provide the reasoning why as well. So that is a job that traditionally schools with very high volume applications and selective, they have to go out and contract additional workers. And this is part of what you did at NYU, where you had a team that was with a high volume of applications coming in. You had to do that. And in a lot of cases, you just gave them a rubric and you said, here's the playbook, and go evaluate them. They did not need to know about NYU much. So that's the equivalent of what we're talking here?
By the end of my tenure, we had an auto denial process that we knew these students were not going to be successful, so they didn't go to faculty, right? So that type of automation was driven by humans, but it was a checklist that any assistant or AI power solution would be able to crush. Ardis, let's aggregate the conversation to the unit of work right now that we're talking about is the employee, the emergence of the AI worker or the AI employee. And what we're saying is that I'm going to look to my right and to the left. I'm going to see them on the background doing things for us. Let's look up. Can I have a manager as an AI assistant and it has hierarchical responsibilities? Can I have, let's look up 2 levels. Can we have executives? Is there a level of leadership? Because if you think about reasoning and you think about how we organize, there is something about orchestration, collaboration. Basically, I'm breaking up the TACO acronym, right? And tasking, and it's all hierarchical. So why not having AI managers? Why not having AI executives in the modern AI workforce? What do you think?
So if you think about what executives do or what middle managers do, right? It's essentially
If you ask my dad, I'm only in meetings. Like, you get paid to go to meetings and talk. Like, when
right.
when do you work? But anyway.
Exactly. I don't know either. Like, when do you work?
Hey.
Is that why you haven't been so? Just so if we're thinking about the output of knowledge work or like middle managers, like what we, like let's say the work of orchestrating projects, like that's pretty complex, I would say. You need to understand and need to have a lot of pieces as part of the context, keep the goal in mind, and then orchestrate all of those pieces together. So I believe that work is going to be up for grabs, but I don't think that is where we're going to start and where we are today.
Okay.
So that's a little bit higher level.
All right.
What that means is that we're now at the, AI is really good at being an individual contributor, a really great individual contributor, right? Because an individual contributor, you can define the output and the work and the tasks and how that can work. But once you go a little bit higher, we're just in the beginning phases of figuring out the capabilities of those AI coworkers that can become managers.
AI as the individual contributor, everybody, I always like to see it as is the intern that never sleeps, right? And obviously, to Ardis' point right now,
Well, it's actually
they crush.
now it's more than an intern as well, right? So the intern maybe was last year, but now the reasoning and the capabilities are becoming an expert.
A young PhD student doing individual contribution that is basically nonstop. So the new ones that we're unpacking here is, can I have this young PhD student manage a team, right? And in human terms, well, not yet. You don't have the experience. You haven't. One of the things that executives do is they, and I'd love for you to unpack this because you're talking about complexity. One of the biggest difference between management as you go move up, it's that decision making. It's how you usually task. You need to understand kind of the system view, and you have to do decisions. And decisions usually are tied to resources. Go do this, assign budget, right? Those type of things. At the same time, what happens, I would say, as you move up, you're solving problems of today, low level. You're solving problems of tomorrow, higher up. You're solving problems of a year from now, 20 years from now. That's like, CIO and like, executive vibes. So under the lens of complexity, when it's seen by assigning resources, I totally see it. An AI manager doing good in that PhD student analogy, being successful. What about connecting the dots in the future? Do you agree with me that they could be good as managers, but maybe when it comes to looking at the work of a really high executive, we will not be there?
I'm not saying we will not be there. I'm saying that where we are today and we're essentially kind of discussing this in the context of 2025, what we're seeing is AI replacing menial tasks, right? That we don't want to do. Those tasks can be a little bit more complex. So think about administrative assistants and things like that. We can replace, we can automate a lot of that stuff. this PhD level student that we can do an individual contributor, but the management is now becoming easier because rather than managing humans where like you had to manage the essentially the human component, right, and you had to manage performance and all these different things with AI, as long as you write that job description, the producibility of that work, it's very consistent, right? It's very consistent in how that's delivered. So you're not managing different personalities. You're not managing the human aspect of it. So middle managers now, or actually individual contributors that we have, can be elevated to essentially think about doing the same work as managers, but now they have AI assistants underneath and AI agents or individual contributors to do that work that specialists were doing before. So the work is kind of changing for those individual contributors. So the people who are smart and are basically automating their work, they're figuring out that they're able to do more and more and more and more, and eventually do the work of a whole department, for example, or multiple people by orchestrating this AI systems. And that's been happening over the past year. So that's where we're starting today, is that this AI workers are becoming part of the org chart because they're delivering the equivalent value of that individual person 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So it's all about the value delivery. So are they going to be able to deliver the value of a whole department and be able to orchestrate that? Sure.
Right.
It really depends on what the outcome is. And in higher education, maybe that, I don't think that's going to be here for the next year or two.
Ardis, the World Economic Forum pushed out the future of jobs report, basically looking at 5 years from now, and they actually take a stab at these jobs that have the higher likelihood of being replaced. So think about cashiers, ticket clerks, administrative assistants. You mentioned that, building caretakers, cleaners, housekeepers, material recording, stock keeping clerks, and so on and so forth. So I recommend everybody to look at this report. It's 290 pages, but it kind of paints a picture of where these skills have the higher possibility of replacement in these entry level tasks for AI assistance. Is basically the path is there, or a path of least resistance. And to Ardis's point, and we're kind of been talking about, they get introduced into the org. So the workplace and changes, right? And we started looking at this AI coworker or the AI employee, and it could have lateral movement, so it could be orchestrating. Really, really exciting. So, oh my gosh, it starts taking my job. The whole, replacement. So let's talk about the human role alongside of this AI workplace, right? I'll start always with this statement, right? I believe that AI is not here to replace, but to amplify, right? And one of the things that they do, they support so that we humans can connect in a really, in a really romantic way, human in the loop and all those kind of things. That's great. But really, what we know is that within 24 hours, we humans are dropping the ball on multiple things. The opportunity that we have in front of us is that I can now be doing the things that I neglect, or I don't have enough time, because I have this support network, and that amplification is where it's at. The role of the human in the AI workplace, where do you see these starting and the shifts kind of coming to the human skills, right? And then we can have a whole conversation of what the skills are going to be needed, but let's just start from like the macro level. Where do you see that happening, right? And how do you see that being the coexistence, right?
Yeah. So our roles are not eliminated, by the way. So they're just really redefined. So we're really transitioning to positions where we can, like you mentioned, we can leverage our unique skills. And in a lot of cases, humans are really transitioning to becoming those managers of AI agents, like we talked about. So they're orchestrating work and they're using this AI tools to enhance the productivity of organizations. And that's what we see the near term future of of that work, or kind of where we belong. So our roles are really become about collaboration, project management, strategic organization, like of work, rather than just the hands-on tasks. So So I guess, if you go back to your dad and say, Dad, I'm on the right path here. Like, I don't need to do all those hands-on stuff. Like, the AI is going to do that. All I need to do is think about how do I orchestrate those, and not necessarily do the hands-on, but just tell them, go do this thing and go do that thing, and orchestrating all that work, which is really, really exciting because, that part of the job sometimes it can feel a little bit more tedious, right? And folks, the way we talk about it today is like we want to eliminate the time consuming work that we're doing. And usually what that means is the actually hands-on work of writing something or creating something or configuring something or like designing or whatever work that you're in. The actual producing that art, those artifacts, and then hitting the buttons, that's the menial work. But the organizational component of it, organizing and kind of thinking about strategy and all that, that's really exciting. And on organizing people, like that's where we thrive and we're really, really good at. So we're needed for tasks that really acquire emotional intelligence, this creativity or critical thinking, also on the ethical judgments, a lot, right? Because depending on the context, that's super important, and that's where AI is not really adept yet to kind of fit that role. Is it going to be there in a few years as we reach towards AGI? I don't know, maybe, but the way that we see it today is we're collaborative creatures, right? We're social creatures. I guess that's the word I was looking. So I don't feel that's going to go away. We're going to like the social aspect is something that we're going to be really good at and we're going to keep, and that's what's going to become really, really important. At least this is in my opinion.
I see it similar, and I believe that one of the things that we want to achieve here is allowing humans to spend more time in that social interaction, because when that plays out really well is where we've seen, and this is basically documented in years of research, incremental innovation, radical innovation, oftentimes thrives on the idea of humans being social, and that socialization bringing creativity to the next level. So the breaks that we see are oftentimes inspirational, and it's the humanity that brings that inspiration. So Ardis, back in a tad on, it's in the org. Now we're talking about the humans. So the AI worker is placed in the work. So in a way, my boss told me to work with this guy and I don't like him, so I have to make it happen. Or there's this new technology that the enterprise is invested. Oh, I hate it, but we have to make it work. So that's literally the vibe. I want to connect the dots with the role of a manager, and now I'm managing AI assistants. So if I'm given a team, and within that team, it's not your decision. You're given a team, you have to implement this solution, whatever, like that type of vibe. But now there are AI agents within that. And the analogy I want everyone to think about is, in your career, at any point you have been given someone who maybe doesn't come from your sector, doesn't speak the language, is being trained differently, and it's like they just don't hit the ground running because they're not good translators. A really good classical example is when you have these teams that kind of get an analyst, and the analyst is like a PhD in math and like wants to do models and like equations, and everyone's looking at them and like, what do I do with this? Like, where is the so what, right? And you start seeing the disconnects of the capability. Just because a analyst can do regression models and like these crazy data pools, that doesn't mean that they're meaningful to the executive, because they all want the so what. And there's examples like that over and over. Why am I saying that? It's the job of the manager to shape that young professional into an impactful one through coaching and like, look, let's use these slides. This is the way you tell the story. Nobody cares about the model. Don't show the math, or actually show the math because you need to know your audience. La 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 la. How do I prepare as a manager to shape up an AI assistant who literally can give me the win? But that's the promise here, right? Let's go back to being humans, and like I want my team to thrive. So it is in my interest to win. And now what we are painting a picture is that in the equation for win organizationally, you're gonna have agents. How do I manage work through agents when they report, quote unquote, report to me?
So I think that's a really good analogy that you mentioned on you have raw talent and you have people who are really good at specific tasks, but how do you coach them and train them and give them the right context and put them into a place where they can be successful? So Ethan Malik wrote a really good book called Co-Intelligence. It's a really good book that, I usually recommend quite a bit and I hand it off to a lot of folks to start thinking. But essentially what a lot of the research that Ethan does in this space is testing new models and testing new techniques. But what's been a trend and what's really true is the people who are really good with AI are experts at a particular field that understand what the expected outcome is, and they're able to tell the AI and drive the AI in towards that expected outcome. So they're able to evaluate what looks good and what doesn't look good, and then iterate very quickly and get them up to speed in order to reproduce that thing that looks really good.
In the artists, to your point, in the future of jobs survey, there's something really interesting on this skills mobility, right? And what you were addressing before, in my point also on the manager, it's to manage against this new workforce. I need to be better prepared with here. Wait for it. Number one, AI and big data. This is they basically conducted a worldwide survey, and these are the skills that are in the rise. So no doubt. Number two, networking, networks and security. Look at number three, technological literacy. Number four, critical thinking. Number five, resilience, flexibility, and agility. Number six, curiosity and lifelong learning. And look, I'm going to stop on the next one, leadership and social influence. All these are really interesting because under the premise of agentic AI workforces, so think about leadership and social influence. Hey, Mary, don't worry about it because we're going to have an agent take over this task for you so you can come and crush on the client facing aspect thing. That's basically social influence. Curiosity and lifelong learning, it keeps on changing. I mean, just this week when it comes to technology, it's like, what do you mean? Like, there's a whole new provider. Do I need to just switch all my workflows and prompts? Critical thinking. I find this very interesting. And I actually, my friend, I see you being one of the best at this. That no, that doesn't sound right. But the AI did it. Like, no, it's wrong. It can be better, right? There's a connectivity about it smells wrong. Like, you have to have domain expertise to look at a report and like, no, that's wrong. They cannot do that, right? So that's where it's going. And of course, technical literacy, my gosh. Now, I want everybody to understand this. So artists, we just painted a picture from the human to the team to the manager. Not all pretty. There's some watch out. So I know you've been thinking about challenges and considerations. Can you tee this up for us?
Yeah, look, we got to be real, right? There's going to be challenges to address as we move forward in this kind of AI-driven workforce, and there's like really, legitimate concerns about things like potential bias, like mistakes, like how do you make mistakes when a human makes a mistake? Sometimes it's a little different, and then how do you like the misuse of AI? So there's a lot of concerns around it, but if you think about it, there's like let's go through a few of them, like governance and scaffolding, right? It's like, how do we need to establish robust scaffolding and governance to ensure the responsible, development of these different systems and even deployments of these systems, right? So today we have a lot of rules and we have a lot of things in place in order to work with humans and be part of organizations, and then how we embed them, and what's the governance structure there. We need to kind of have those things available for AI. This idea of 24/7 expectation. This is a big one, by the way. Remember last time we talked about the benchmarking and like the productivity and the KPIs and how that AI leverages and lifts everything in there, that baseline. Well, this is the same thing, 24/7 expectations. So there's a risk that AI could really create an expectation of 24/7 productivity that really like the humans can't possibly match. This idea of, you mentioned like you can't go to the AI doesn't need to go to the bathroom, right? So we need to kind of set clear boundaries and expectations around that. Things like trust and accountability. So when we in a workplace with AI coworkers, it's really essential that we build trust and maintain kind of clear lines of accountability, right? So is AI going to be like fired? Like there's like what's that notion here? So it's like how do you trust it and you put accountability? So it's a critical kind of building block of this system. Like where's the human? And we talk about human in the loop. Where are you going to put that human check-in around a particular process or around a particular goal? It's like where is the human going to come and validate these things and kind of keep track of that accountability, like the accountability loop. And because of these things are moving so fast, right? The technology is moving so fast, kind of the adaptability and continuous learning, it's just really hard, man. Like it's incredible. It's like how do you do that? And there is a lot of things that we have to think through, organizations have to think through, but the upside, it's tremendous. And if you're not doing it, then your competitor is doing it and every organization else is doing it and you're getting left behind. And I'm not saying that we should put blinders on and start adopting AI or using all these different systems without these guardrails and what we talked about, the governance and everything else. But what the opposite of that is like your neighbors, your competitors, everybody else, and now you're left behind. And that's not a good place to be. So
There is under the lens of these risks and challenges to consider, right? So it's a really important aspect for us humans to prepare to the upcoming AI workforce through the lens of upskilling, right? And one of the things I love on the Futures of Works report is that it takes a stab at the next 5 years, and there's things that start to emerge that are really, really important. So it is obvious that generative AI is taking a step of creative thinking, like marketing and publications. It's around writing, multilingual skills. Like back in my day, I remember a lot of young engineers starting to learn Mandarin because work was moving to China, so you need to become multilingual. Those skills probably a little bit underrated. So think about the following, artists. You mentioned this already, right? Technological literacy, keeping up as the number 3 most important skill for the next 5 years. Creative thinking. I want to pass that to you because I find you to be like one of the best at. You see the AI output and you're like, no, that doesn't make sense. Just like when I look at a report of a domain I know and I can just see it in 2 seconds, like that's wrong. And the analyst is like, wow, I've been working on this for 15 hours. Like there's something in your mind that connects. So what is creative thinking as one of the most important and emerging app skills for you to manage against AI workers?
yeah, I'm not even thinking about that. So like if you want to like personally like it's a little soft for me creative thinking. It's like you got to solve real problems. But when you're thinking about like practical steps for organizations today, it's like look, you have to take practical steps and investing in the reskilling and upskilling of your existing workforce to work alongside AI, just like we've been talking about. Like it's really important. Just this week, like we give access to the rest of the organization here at Element on Gemini as part of our Google Workspaces. And Google Workspaces made Gemini now available for everybody, so you don't have to pay an extra $30. So that's a really good step. It's like because organizations really need to learn how to incorporate that. So reskilling and upskilling your teams to work alongside that AI is really important. So they need to develop those new skills to stay relevant. And you mentioned before that the World Economic Forum, like the jobs are going to change. AI is going to create 11 million new jobs, but it's also going to replace a whole bunch of them, right? So the opportunities are going to be greater, but there's going to be a change in what those jobs are. In terms of other very valuable things to organizations, hire AI specialists, right? This is an area where you can hire professionals with the skills to kind of design and enhance these AI tools, and then you're going to need people who are really good at kind of developing training, managing these systems. So that's going to be a requirement. So no longer can you not have folks who can kind of work with these systems or work with automation and so on and so forth. I believe it was Jensen Wang who said that, but IT is going to be the new HR because they're going to be able to manage this AI agents. Now, is that true? Maybe, maybe not. depending on how it is. But Lattice, which is an HR system, like they're thinking about it the same way. They're saying, look, we're building our system, our HR system, in order to handle this digital workers. They go through onboarding, they get access to tools, they get access to data, they get permissions to do certain things. So the onboarding process that they're building for humans, it's the same thing for this AI workers that introduce in terms of the job. So IT is the new HR. It's an interesting topic, but it's going to evolve. Those IT departments need to evolve to become more kind of like, they need to understand what the job to be done is, right? So managing and orchestrating AI agents. And like I said, this whole idea of onboarding AI, it's really fascinating to me because we see so many parallels in there. All right, enough of that. So what do we think? Future outlook. We've been talking about this year, but what's happens next?
There's two stages, obviously, right? And we're going to try to start wrapping up here. The two stages that we're seeing is the emergence of a unit of work and how we start adapting it. But then the second stage is the teammate and the hierarchical aspect there. So at least that's for me the outcome. Finally, the future of work and how we work will change. And what I'm really, really excited about and what I cannot tell you is that me, the operations AI executive, the way I would work will be different. How? TBD. What about you?
It's very clear to me that we're moving towards this hybrid human AI workforce, and we got to embrace it as an opportunity for growth and collaboration. So it's about really shifting our mindset and moving towards AI that supports, amplifies, connects, and makes us really like super professionals or super, super experts, right? So that's that's the future of where we are. So
I love that. And it's here, Ardis. So because it's here, it will evolve and it will be changing dynamics. So as we wrap this up, let's make an invitation for everybody to come and share their experiences and how they're starting to see this agentic AI in their workplace today. Sounds good, Ardis?
Yeah, I think this is a conversation that we need to have, and we're literally just starting this journey, and hopefully this 3-part series was a really deep dive and really good way for you to start thinking how the systems work, where we are today, and how can they work together, and how can they affect the AI workforce. And the rule book is not written yet. We're just literally having conversations and starting to look a month ahead, 6 months ahead, because the stuff is moving so fast, and we need to start thinking how we can get our organizations more productive, how we can change workflows, how we can think about the AI human collaboration, and how do we make our teams more more productive. And ultimately, right, the whole goal of this is how do we provide more value to our student, and how do we make that student experience better, and how do we provide a lot more value to our customer, right? To the student, to the customer, to the constituents that we're serving. How do we do better without introducing a lot of cost? So that's the idea that's in the back of my head. Is it's all about being more efficient, providing better value, and huge experience boost to the consumer and to the buyer and to ultimately our student.
There's an opportunity in front of us, and I really like how, in a way, you bring this home. So everybody, enjoy these 3 episodes. The opportunity that it's ahead of us, we try to break it up for you in 3 conversations. Let us know how that journey goes. And Ardis, maybe we'll catch up in about 6 months on how many of these things we got right. And I'm going to tell you, it's probably we got them all right. It's just the timing. So we'll see what happens. You want to sign us off?
Till next time, everybody, please review and give us 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. Till next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.